Hey, what is going on, WBE fans? It is General Tariel bringing you back the Pick'ems for playoffs. We are now going into the quarterfinals, and we are getting very hyped up. And as always, I am joined by my wonderful co-host and friend, Choice CJ. CJ, would you like to say hello to the fans?
Hey WBE fans, it's your friend Choice CJ here, and hyped is definitely how I would also describe myself, Ben. We had a bunch of awesome games from round one of the playoffs, including what I would say a couple of surprising upsets.
Yeah,
What do you think?
There was definitely a few upsets looking into it. One of the main few technical upsets based on seeding was the South Texas Stabilizing and Vivid Color actually picking up a win against the New Orleans Pelipers and Pokemon. A little bit upset at that, of course, being in John's front office and all, but he played well overall. It's just the fact that as Psychic Mew basically broke apart the team. Mono Psychic was always troubling for the Pelipers because they don't have the Dark type. That was the main fear going into the match, and it definitely did be a giant factor in it. While the other upset that people are mainly looking at is the Minnesota Vikavolt dropped to the Newcastle Needle Kings and Patters. Very surprising that A-Drive losing a little bit early, but he brought basically the exact same team versus Patters, which is not really the way you want to go in playoffs. Dan already building kind of similar every week, but bringing almost the exact same team really didn't help him at all. Basically, just the toxic sub worked very well versus Dan team. Once Dan even saw it, he knew that he lost. Patters brought an amazing team that week, prepped very well and played very well. So we definitely deserve to move on into the next round. I'm hoping to see more from him. And when it came down to it for the results of the analysts and everything, and of course for the games, we upped all the pick'ems to 2 points worth because we are going to increase them per round of playoffs, so they're worth more than just the regular season games. And overall, the best analyst was JB Westside from the previous round 1, going 12-0, while the worst was AA Ron 2420, actually going 2-10, which was unfortunate. So that means that Aaron only got one game right, while JB got all of his games right. The fans at home, y'all went 8-4. Just like myself, you dropped on the New Orleans Pelipers and the Minnesota Vikavolt, like a few other analysts. Overall, surprising game right there. CJ is still undefeated on locks, but when it comes down to it, I am still in the lead with a percentage with a record of 145 and 49 with the overall score. And y'all are right behind me with a 0.7% lead versus me, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, I did the math, and so you actually gained a 1/10 of a percentage point of a lead over the fans. Last week, you had a 0.6% lead. Now you have a 0.7% lead. So you have like 74.7% winning percentage, and the fans are at 74%. So it could still easily flip if one of you guys, if you go bad on a week and they go great on a week. So I think this is going to be a photo finish, Ben. I'm going to cross my fingers that you, my good bud, can pull this off, but I don't know if we're going to be able to hold off the fans.
They're just the fans. They don't know what we're talking about. This is our job. This is our show. But no, you guys are doing tremendous, and I'm looking forward to what the rest of the playoffs has to show, and not only the pick'ems, but the amazing battles that are to come. But speaking of these battles, CJ, I think we should hop right into it.
Yeah, definitely. I can kick things off with an exciting Week 2 rematch between the Bronx Beartics, coached by Joey Pokey AMMD, and the South Texas Stabilized, coached by In Vivid Color. Now, I know that there's a couple of transaction changes on Vivid's side that make this matchup a little bit different. One thing that still looks very good in this situation is Hawlucha. I like Hawlucha. Like, it's tough because you do have like the Toxapex there, which can like beat most variants of Hawlucha. Like a +2 Hawlucha with acrobatics still only does like 70-ish% to Toxapex, so the Toxapex can throw off a haze, and then even without any attack investment, like a Sludge Wave from a Toxapex can still break a substitute on a max HP Hawlucha, so you can't really like take advantage of it that much. And of course Toxapex can always run like Ice Beam if it wants to be guaranteed to break the sub on like a max Spadef Hawlucha, if that does to come. But the thing that really stands out to me about Hawlucha in this matchup is that it's got some really fantastic setup opportunities on two Pokemon in particular, those being Crocodile and Breloom. So in last generation, in the UU tier, Hawlucha really liked to set up on Crocodile, just because like Scarf Crocodile is so popular for like, you know, just having the Moxie sweeps and things like that. But Hawlucha is a Pokemon that can really take advantage of like a Choice Sculpt Crocodile, and it's just not a great move that it gets to do damage to Hawlucha. I guess it could run like Aerial Ace or something in this matchup if it needs to. Breloom is in a little bit of the same situation where it just doesn't have a lot of awesome coverage options, and its 2 stabs are both resisted by Hawlucha. So if you've got a Hawlucha with Grassy Seed coming in on either of those 2 Pokemon, it could definitely spell trouble for Joey. I definitely expect him to have some sort of precaution for Hawlucha. But if it's not played perfectly, Hawlucha can steal the game here. On paper, you see something like Sneasel as potentially having a good matchup, but I think it's actually not that great, because obviously you have Breloom with the Mach Punch priority. You do have Sneasel with the option to run Ice Shard to out-prioritize that Breloom, but even a Life Orb Ice Shard is not going to one-shot a Breloom. You have Gallade, which can actually run Vacuum Wave. You have Comfey with the priority Draining Kiss, thanks to its triage ability. And then you've got like a couple of relatively good defensive checks like Piloswine and Toxapex. So Sneasel I actually don't think will come this week. It's funny because last week we thought Sneasel had a really nice matchup in the game versus John, but ended up not coming. I think that probably threw John for a little bit of a loop. I think the number one biggest threat on Vivid's side is going to be some sort of setup Mew. Really, he just needs Psychic coverage and Bug coverage for Joey's team, and that looks really hard to stop. So you can basically run those 2 types and then run Roost and then run a setup move of choice. If you want to go Nasty Plot with Signal Beam, or you want to go physical and run either Swords Dance or Bulk Up with Leech Life, I think it basically beats everything, unless like Bronzong can survive and go for like a Toxic or something, or something like that, or if Crocodile has like a Reducing Berry, something like that. I like Bulk Up, I think, most of all those options, just because it makes it a little bit easier for Mew to take a hit from something like Crocodile or Gallade if they're going for very powerful Dark-type moves. And then for the item, I kind of like Z, like Psychic Z on Mew most of all, because it means that it can't get tricked by Gothitelle. Like, I guess you could run Shed Shell, and then like switch out when Gothitelle comes in. But, like, I think at that point, like, Mew is going to be pretty threatening versus Gothitelle if it does get up, like, a Bulk Up or a Swords Dance. So just having the option to not get tricked to Choice Scarf or a Choice Specs or whatever Gothitelle chooses to bring, I think would be more valuable than, like, a Shed Shell. Sticky Web is definitely a big concern for me coming for Joey. Just because it really neuters a lot of the Pokemon that Joey could have. So, like, Gothitelle isn't going to be as potent of a trapper if it's being outsped by everything on the team. Revenge Killing from Crocodile is not as powerful. Nidoking is a lot spookier if it outspeeds everything. And there's just not a lot of great removal options on Joey's side. You've got Comfey, which can have Defog, of course, and Kabutops with Rapid Spin, but I don't think either of those are really stellar hazard removal options. But he's got to have some sort of plan in place for Sticky Web. Maybe he has some sort of anti-lead for Galvantula, like a fast Gallade with Taunt or something like that. But there's always the option of the mid-game webs coming out from Galvantula. Just because Galvantula is decent and on its own in this matchup with like Thunder and Volt Switch, plus probably Energy Ball would be the move that I would run, and then Sticky Web in the 4th slot. So that's the breakdown on Vivid's side. For Joey, I would say that even though Poliwrath has been added to the Sableye roster, I think Volcarona is still the overall biggest threat. There's very little stopping it if it gets to +1. What I would run is Quiver Dance, Dual Stabs, and then probably Psychic in the last move slot. Something like Hurricane as well is not a horrible option. But I like Psychic because it's going to hit the Poliwrath really hard. It's going to do decent damage to like Noivern and Hawlucha. If he wants to throw a Psychic Z Crystal on there, then neither Noivern nor Rapidash are going to be able to take it from full, assuming they don't have any bulk investment. If they do have bulk investment, those 2 Pokemon might not even be able to survive after Rocks unless they're like Spadef AV or things like that. So I think Volcarona, if it can find a setup opportunity, could be quite good. Piloswine actually has a really nice matchup here, both offensively and defensively. Its stabs are just kind of hard to deal with. Poliwrath and Mew are going to be probably the 2 best switch-ins to Piloswine, just because Piloswine doesn't have like a super effective option to hit either of those 2 Pokemon. But like basically it has a super effective option for everything else, except for like Sneasel and Galvantula, which don't really count as switch-ins anyway. Defensively, I think it's a pretty good check to Galvantula, Rapidash, Sneasel, and Nidoking. So it's true that Piloswine could just come with like a standard rock set, which is good because like if Piloswine is going to be forcing switch-ins, it's nice to take advantage of that by going for Stealth Rocks. But he could do something cheeky like run Rest Talk with dual stabs. It's just going to be a little bit hard for Vivid to kill. Or maybe he just runs Rest with like Aromatherapy on Comfy or something like that. So we'll see if he tries to mix it up there at all. There's a couple of other sneaky good win cons. Calm Mind, HP Ground, Comfy is good. Just kind of needs chip on Aggron. I think one way to pressure Aggron is with something like Trick Room, Bronzong. So if you go with Trick Room, Gyro Ball, Zen Headbutt, and Earthquake, that actually looks really nice versus Vivid's squad. And so I think if you can use those two to break for one another, like whichever one you use early game paves the way for the second Mon in the late game. So I think that could be kind of cool. We'll have to see if he chooses to bring a Bronzong like that, just because it is pretty valuable defensively. It does really well versus the dual stabs on Noivern, Nidoking, Tapu Bulu, Mega Aggron, and even Mew to an extent. So we'll see what Joey chooses to go with there. You know, he's been so comfortable all season long with his defensive core, Piloswine, Toxapex, and Bronzong, really coming in clutch for him. So that's my analysis of what I think the biggest threats are going to be in this matchup. When it came to the picks, I had to go in favor of Joey and the Bronze Beartics. They did lose their Week 13 game versus A-Drive, but they looked really unbeatable all season, and he didn't really even try in that game versus A-Drive because he was, trying to hold on to his best sets for playoffs. So now that he is finally, at the moment where it matters most, I think he's going to pull out all the stops and going to be able to take this one from Vivid. There are actually quite a few believers in Vivid amongst our analysts and fans. We've got 4 people total going in favor of Vivid. The fans are locking in Vivid. The Kraselki is locking in Vivid. The fans are locking in Joey. And you on the other side of the mic there, Ben, are also locking in Joey.
Yeah, it's really difficult to go against him with how he's been doing this season. And even though Vivid did do well last round against the New Orleans Pelipers and John, and I just feel like if he does have that setup Mew, he's still going to be a threat. But Joey is just so smart and so great at battling in general that I really can't go against him, especially in like playoffs when he's going to be giving it his all and focusing really hard. Based off some of the things you mentioned, though, I would really like to see a really offensive Piloswine instead of just bulky, like just something out of the ordinary, because its stabs really do just run through Vivid's team, but of course you have to be aware of like the grassy terrain hindering the Earthquake from the Piloswine against like the Mega Aggron. But if you really wanted to run like Ground Z on Piloswine and really catch him off guard and just have Mega Ag drop really early, even though it's not really that big of an annoyance for the Beartics, it'd still be really crazy to see that, to have a Piloswine just drop a Mega Aggron. But apart from that, Volcarona I really feel like is going to be very big for the Beartics in general, and going back to the Mew for the Sableye, I feel like that will be their win con. Even if Hawlucha does have a decent matchup, I don't really expect it. We were really expecting it versus the New Orleans Pelipers, but Vivid just hasn't really used it that well at all this season, so he didn't even opt to bring it in playoffs before. So I'd highly doubt he'd bring it versus Joey this week, because Joey would definitely respect Hawlucha and not let that happen. So a few of the many reasons, but overall, Joey's just been playing tremendously, and that's why I have to go in favor of him. He's just one of the best teams to reliably pick for playoffs, and that's why I'm deciding for him.
Yeah, I really like that Piloswine idea. I'm actually a big fan of like Jolly Piloswine in general, instead of like the bulky variant like you're mentioning. But yeah, maybe he runs Stomping Tantrum in addition to Earthquake to get around that grassy terrain issue. I forgot to mention that.
Oh, that's true. I forgot to get Stomping Tantrum.
Yeah, so not as powerful, but it's a good way to work around the restrictions of grassy terrain.
And for the next match, we have the Milwaukee Brewers, coached by Wolfie Glick, going against the Newcastle Needlekings and Patters. Now, this is a Week 1 rematch, which isn't saying too much, because that is at the very start of the season, when these coaches aren't comfortable with their teams yet. They're literally just drafted them, and they're going right into battling their first builds and everything like that. Wolfie did have the 4-0 win against Patters, so I just don't know how big this is going to be. I definitely feel like they brought some of their better sets potentially in Week 1, because, of course, you really want to start off with a win. So I don't really feel like that's going to be taking too big of an effect compared to like these teams who face like in weeks 11 through 13 or something like that. So there's still something you got to watch out for though going into this. But for Wolfie's side, I see Exegil being terrifying for the Newcastle Needlekings. Hippowdon, of course, being the best check to Excadrill, but once Hippo is like weakened, if it gets a free SD, I'm pretty sure Drill can just win. And even if the Hippowdon isn't like respecting Drill and it doesn't carry like Whirlwind, you can bring a Magnet Rise setup Drill and potentially win like that. But other than like setup or just being completely offensive, you might just want Excadrill to be a designated check to Tapu Koko, because Koko is going to be a massive pain versus your team as Wolfie. And apart from like, I guess, Gigalith and Alolan Golem, you really don't have too many things that want to help deal with the Tapu Koko, because of just the boost from the electric terrain, and the fairy coverage is overall just making it a demon two-face for sure. But the MVP for the Bewares and Mega Blastoise is looking very solid, but struggles, of course, with the obvious Revenge Killer and Tapu Koko. Overall, it's just going to be a pain for the entire team, like I mentioned. But the coverage of Scald, Ice Beam, and Aura Sphere basically covers everything on the Newcastle's team. Aura Sphere helping you hit the Mega Gyarados and like the Snorlax a little bit harder, water damage for like everything else, and then Ice Beam helps you 4 times super effective against the Alolan Exeggutor, and of course the Xatu as well. But if you're worried about being roostalled by like a Spadef Xatu, you could opt to run Dark Pulse as well to help out with that. Of course, for the fourth slot, instead of Dark Pulse, you could also potentially run something like Aqua Jet for like a setup Tarak that you're worried about, or like Delphox as well, because Delphox can run like Grass Sea or the Power Herb Solar Beam set with magic and everything like that. You can also run something like Rapid Spin in general just to get rid of hazards, something of the sort. So Blastoise really has just a throw up for that fourth slot, but I feel like those 3 solid coverage moves are going to be very important for Wolfie, because he loves running it offensively and getting a lot of his kills for that. So if he's able to revolve his team around Excadrill and Mega Blastoise, I feel like that's going to be very key for him. Another Pokemon to give good support to that is likely to be a Scarf Virizion. It helps you not risk a Speed type versus Terrakion unless the Terrakion is also Scarf. It helps you potentially get a Scarf Stonage off versus like Delphox, Xatu, Venomoth. Those would be pretty key, especially if Venomoth's like a Quiver Dance setup set. Also helps you versus a DD Gyarados. You're able to click Close Combat or Leaf Blade after that thing tries to get up a DD, or you just outspeed it in general if it's just a full-on attacking. You get another thing that, or you get something that actually outspeeds Tapu Koko, which is good. Generally for Wolfie, you're only going to get a Scarfer or Sand Excadrill that's going to be able to outspeed Koko, unless you decide to get like Trick Room up with Duosion or something, which would actually be pretty interesting. But of course, Powders does have Trick Room abusers. Virizion could be potential setup with like Roxy for Xatu, but I feel like overall it just really benefits in being Scarf and helping the team overall as a whole, especially when that Tapu Koko can carry something like Brave Bird just to blow back the Virizion. Gigalith and Alolan Golem, like I mentioned before, is something that can help Koko a little bit more. I don't feel like they're overall that great. Gigalith is definitely going to be coming because Wolfie loves it. And of course, it gives that great support for Excadrill that he's going to be looking for, even though I don't think it's be doing too much. Alolan Golem is pretty garbage, in all honesty. And even though it could help out in the long run, it's not going to be there for that much longer anyways. So I feel like it's not worth it, even if you were to bring like, I don't know, like an AV set to help out or something. Tornadus, of course, Wolfie's burb that he loves so much. I could definitely just seeing a pretty decent support with U-Turn, Hurricane, Toxic, and then Heat Wave or Knockoff in that fourth slot. Of course, it has amazing utility overall, so any of these moves can be substituted out, but I feel like that just helps getting a knockoff versus some of the very offensive mons. You could potentially get a knockoff versus the Tapu Koko, which is pretty huge if it's not Z. You could even be Z Hurricane on Torn if you really want to get just a lot of damage off, because he doesn't have the best flying type switch in when it comes to the Nidoking, because your steel type is of course that Escavalier, which is neutral to flying spam. You're able to get big damage off versus a Powdon if you need to. You can even run Superpower, of course, on the turn to help deal with Snorlax if you're worried about that, even though I don't feel like setup Snorlax is the biggest threat looking into this. But overall, Torn's just doing well. You can, of course, get that Toxic on the Powdon if you just want to rotate out. If you want to run like AV Torn, that's really helpful versus like an offensive Venomoth or something like that, or even like a Delphox or something of the sort if you feel like you don't switch into that too well, if you don't want Blastoise to take heavy damage, or if you opt not to bring Mandibuzz, something of the sort. So Torn definitely has a potential value. It's just whether or what Wolfie wants to decide to do with it. So. As for the Newcastle Nidokings, Powders is definitely like looking to pressure with the Koko. That's all I've mentioned. You definitely want to run U-Turn on that Koko so you're able to switch out versus the Excadrill and pressure from there. And one amazing thing to go into that also just deals with the entire team of the Bewares is probably Mega Gyarados. That thing is looking tremendous offensively. I don't know exactly what set you want to run immediately. I just kind of look at like just offensive with DD, which I think might just be the best in all honesty. You could definitely run it slightly a bit bulkier so you can definitely take hits from like the Aura Sphere and Mega Blastoise, like I mentioned. I don't really know if he'll take anything for Virizion from the long run, but you're just able to get plenty of damage off overall with your stabs. You could definitely run other coverage to help deal with stuff, but Gyarados and Toko are just going to weaken the team overall for potentially like something like Scarf Tarak or like a Quiver Dance Venomoth, which I feel like has the very likelihood of coming. So it can carry that DD, but it has to watch out for that Scarf Virizion, which I definitely feel like is very likely. But once again, if you're worried about that, I feel like Xatu is a great bring purely to check this Virizion, and that's going to be pretty helpful. But because of Virizion's natural Spadef Bulk, I'm pretty positive a Xatu doesn't even OHKO with Air Slash, because Xatu's special attack is very lacking, and Virizion has that, I believe it's 120 or whatever in the special defense stat. But without bulky Mega Blastoise or a very fat Weezing, Terrakion is looking terrifying, and even then if you run a banded Terrakion, you're not switching into a Stone Edge either way, so I don't really feel like it matters too much. Terrakion's just going to help blow apart the team, that's all it's going to come down to. Once again, like I mentioned, it can be Scarf just to help clean up a little bit more. Might come down to a Scarf speed tie against the Virizion. It's really going to be like a 50-50 in prep versus those two, the horses going up against one another. But it's really just a great revenge if you bring Scarf for Torn and Gengar. It's going to be pretty helpful. Of course, it's not necessarily the best revenge versus Gengar, because you don't really want to be clicking EQ too much versus Wolfie's team. You might really want to prefer to click Stone Edge, but then you, of course, have the chance of missing, so it's not the best in the long run. But honestly, if I were to bring Tarak, I would just bring Bandit and just click moves and get off the most damage possible. And then you're just really just helping out Koko in the long run, because Koko is just the Mon in this matchup for sure. Like it is in most, Tapu Koko is probably the best Mon in Draft League format. I think we came to that conclusion based off of Gen 7. But lastly, once again, I'd like to mention the Quiver Dance Venomoth. I think it actually looks very scary. Of course, you have the designated Drill and Sand to be a good check. But apart from that, I think like AB Torn's the only thing in the long run that can really help you out with that. Gigalith's going to be worn down so easily over time, so I don't really feel like that's too big of a deal. It doesn't take too much into the game for Gigalith basically to die. There's very few games where Wolfie actually had Gigalith near the end of his game, or if it was in the end of the match where he won, it probably had very minimal health, because reliable recovery, you're basically just throwing like a 50% berry on Gigalith and that's it. So you're able to get that chip off, and just with the tinted lens from Venomoth, you're going to be getting such heavy damage offers to the team. They're going to be able to pick up these KOs after +1, and then just do plenty of damage. So even if you don't want to run Quiver, you can run like maybe just Life Orb or Choice Specs and do heavy damage overall. But when it came down to it, I definitely had to vote in favor of the Milwaukee Bewears and Wolfie Glick. And as for the analysts, we had 4 analysts going in favor of the Newcastle Nidoking, Aaron 2420 actually locking in for Patters, while the remainder of analysts and the fans at home actually going in favor of the Milwaukee Bewears. Both Dr. Slacking and actually you, Choice CJ, locking in Wolfie. Do you want to give me the information on why you decided to lock in Wolfie for quarterfinals?
Yeah, just high level, like watching Wolfie play, like his just understanding of Pokemon in general in terms of not just like, you know, reading the situation, trying to anticipate what your opponent is going to do, but just his positioning in general and trying to set himself up for late game is on such another level. And so like Patters is a very good battler in his own right. But I think Wolfie is just like, he's so honed in on exactly how to execute the victory here. I like a lot of the points that you brought up in your analysis, like the fact that Koko applies so much pressure, but it could just go for U-turn on any of the potential switch-ins, like Excadrill, Alolan Golem, and Gigalith, and then just go straight into that Terrakion is horrifying. All of those Pokemon are going to get crushed by close combat, of course. And like, yeah, if you, like you mentioned, if it's like a banded set, like nothing really wants to take 2 banded CCs, besides like Gengar, I guess. So that's pretty crazy. I think that Wolfie is going to have to go with a pretty offensive strategy, because he has no counterplay for that. Like I think Excadrill probably will still be the response to Koko, but I think a sneaky bring would be like what he brought last week with the Choice Scarf Sandforce. Just because like the ability to run Scarf Drill is so nice versus the combination of Koko, Terrakion, and Delphox, which are all weak to ground type coverage, of course. And then you can put a little bit of bulk on the Excadrill. You don't necessarily have to go max attack. And then if you really need that extra oomph on Excadrill, you could just use Gigalith to set up the sand, and you get that +1 attack boost from the Sand Force ability. Maybe he chooses to run it fully defensively. That's not so bad either, because you can run Mold Breaker and Guaranteed Rocks on Xatu. You're going to be able to punish like Patter's favorite defogger, which is Tapu Koko, and be able to get up rocks pretty easily for like the entirety of the game. But yeah, that's the only other analysis to add on what you did. You did a great job breaking that one down. The third game of the week is going to be between the San Diego Chim Chargers, coached by Lord Envy, and the Durham Druddigons, coached by 6-Foot Hacks, aka Leo. So this is a rematch of a Week 9 battle between these two teams. That game was a very, very close 1-0. It was a good, well-played game on both sides. Maybe you can argue that Envy got a little lucky. Like, the main thing that stood out to me was Azumarill dodged a Hurricane, and Azumarill was a tremendous problem to Leo's team. But I don't think that's really fair to say, because Envy also played extremely well. He scouted out for Z moves on Moltres and was able to preserve his Azumarill that way. He did a good job making aggressive predictions with his Azumarill, like he had Facade on that Azumarill after it got burned, and was able to punish some switches on Leo's side. So I think he deserved the win just with the way that he played. Kind of along those lines, I still think that Azumarill is going to be one of the biggest issues for Leo in this game. At least in terms of the prep, Leo just didn't have a good way to switch into it or damage it in the last one. And like the reason that is just because he doesn't have any good options on his team for dealing with it. Like, his options are going to be like bulky Manaphy, bulky Muck, Grass Silvally. He might even bust out one of his favorite techs, which is Intimidate Tauros, to try and deal with the Azumarill. So we'll have to see how that goes. If Azumarill does come with like a Belly Drum set rather than a bulky set, there's just very little counterplay for that I see from Leo coming out. Sceptile is also a big issue. So Leo brought a lot of prep last time just to deal with Mega Sceptile. He brought an AV Reuniclus, and he brought a Scarf Manaphy. But I think that like those are not the ideal ways for dealing with Sceptile. I think like just a fat Gluttony Muck is going to be a little bit better for checking it. Just because like the Muck, that's kind of the role that it's best suited for. Whereas of course Manaphy, you want it to be maybe like a bulky pivot or a setup mon. But then the one problem with like a Gluttony Muck this week is that it's going to be very vulnerable to Sceptile if it's SD. I think SD with EQ and Dragon Claw, it just looks amazing here. In the last slot, I'd probably just put like X Scissor, because that's going to be a relatively strong way of hitting the Reuniclus, which is probably like his best response to a moveset like that. Moltres also is like a quote-unquote decent switch in to a set like that, but Dragon Claw is still going to do a ton, especially if rocks are up. Speaking of rocks, Envy's strategy was so effective in the first game because he was able to keep rocks off of his side of the field, and I think that's definitely going to need to happen again if Envy is going to pull out the W here. Probably needs to bring it again on the Rotom Ghost. That's been his very trusty defogger all season long. It's like one of the most frequently brought Pokemon for Envy this season, which is pretty cool. But yeah, just like having the bulky Heracross, the bulky Azumarill, the Togekiss was relatively bulky, even though it had a choice Scarf. All of those Pokemon would be punished a lot by having up rocks, and trying to pivot between all those different options. So yeah, be on the lookout for Leo to prioritize Stealth Rocks in this game. I wonder if Scarf Victini will be the option for Revenge Killing Mega Lopunny this time instead of Scarf Togekiss. Just because Scarf Victini is, it's obviously one of the best sets that it can run in general. It's going to be a good way to deal with Lopunny with +1 Como-O, which Togekiss does not outspeed with a Scarf. And then, just being able to pivot around with U-turn and things like that is really great. Maybe you can get the Muck to come in thinking that it can trap the Victini, and then you go out into your Dugtrio or something like that. Could be really, really nice. On Leo's side, the biggest threat is still far and away the Mega Lopunny. The Mega Lopunny applied so much pressure in the first game, just claiming knockout after knockout in that one. Part of the reason that Lopunny is so scary here is because all of Envy's best checks kind of hate rocks. So like Togekiss and Victini stand out to me as kind of like the best checks. Togekiss especially, because it does have the option to run Roost. But of course, those two Pokemon are weak to rocks. Two Pokemon that are not weak to rocks that still can kind of take High Jump Kick are Heracross and Azumarill. So maybe you can use those two to switch in. But neither of them have reliable recovery, and they're both going to take a chunk of damage from return. It take like 40% or so minimum from an adamant return. So if you get just a little bit of chip on those two Pokemon, they are no longer responses to Lopunny. So definitely going to be the number one option on Leo's side. I agree in general with avoiding a Tail Glow Manaphy in this matchup, just because like it's a little bit tough. The Azumarill, if it runs Sap Sipper, is pretty much a hard wall to any set of Manaphy. Victini can Revenge Kill with its electric coverage. Sceptile can outspeed it and Revenge Kill it. So I think that going with a non-Tail variant is the right idea, but I don't know if Scarf is necessarily the most effective. I think maybe some sort of Toxic set, whether it's with like Rest and Rain Dance, or it's with like Protect, or even U-Turn. I think that would be a little bit more effective. Just the only Pokemon that's going to be troubling for that set is still the Sceptile. But it could basically wear down everything else outside of like a Rest Azumarill or anything like that. Any Pokemon with Rest can beat that sort of Toxic Manaphy. But maybe that's the set that we need to look out for. Reuniclus, not so great offensively here, just because Drapion is a hard stop to it. I don't think he'll come for that reason, but I really liked the bulky set that he brought last time to deal with like Sceptile, Togekiss, things like that. Whether he goes like a specially defensive again or goes Fizdef, I think that's really the way to go. The best overall setup sweeper, I think, remains Como-O. Just because you run, you don't even have to run stabs on it necessarily. Probably just run like EQ and Poison Jab, and it basically deals with everything. Maybe in the fourth slot, so the third slot is like Dragon Dance. The fourth slot you can put, whatever move of your choice, probably like the fighting move, just so that way Ditto doesn't have like a super effective way to hit Como, if it comes down to it. One sleeper bring, and I'll end on this one, would be Z Sunny Day Moltres. I've suggested this for Leo earlier in this season, but I think if the Victini comes without a Scarf or it is sufficiently weakened, I think that a Z Sunny Day Moltres can do really well when running Solar Beam to hit things like Azumarill. And then just Fire coverage in general does really, really well versus MV's team. If he doesn't want to go with an offensive Moltres, I think defensively it has a really good value. It's a good switch into Sceptile, Heracross, Registeel, things like that. If MV elects not to bring rocks again, that's going to dramatically increase the value of Moltres. We'll see if that ends up happening, though, just because I think that Leo was able to pivot really freely, and that was troublesome for MV, especially with like Regenerator Reuniclus over Magic Guard. So he's probably going to want to punish that this time around. Now that the analysis is complete, let's now look at the picks. It's fairly even, I would say. We've got probably 3 coaches going in favor of Leo, and the rest going in favor of MV. I'm going to be one of those people who are going in favor of MV here, as much as it pains me to say, since Leo is my pal. But yeah, I'm going to go in favor of them. It looks like the fans are also going in favor of MV. Meanwhile, Ben, on the other side there, you are going in favor of Leo in this game.
Yeah, I had to go in favor of Leo. It's probably got a little bit of bias, like you mentioned. He's a good buddy of ours, but I trust the Mega Lopunny. He's been doing great with it all season. I do feel like it's going to be a massive threat in this game in general. He's been doing great with Alolan Muck, Reuniclus, etc., and I feel like those are all going to be pretty big here. The Alolan Muck, like you mentioned, has to watch out for an ST Sceptile, but also has to be aware of the Dugtrio, of course, that wants to try and trap it. It's always going to be a big issue. One thing, though, if you want to watch out for, or if you want to abuse, a Power-Up Punch Mega Lopunny or something of the sort, or even just Lopunny in general, you have to respect the Ditto on MV's side, so you definitely have to bring, that bulky Reuniclus, or maybe even, a Fairy Savali, which would also help you out with, Heracross and potentially the Mega Sceptile as well. So just a few things there that you have to be aware of when you're Leo, but overall I feel like the normal spam for Mega Lopunny and potentially the Tauros as well is going to be pretty big for him. I feel like Mega Sableye and Victini are going to be big threats on the Gym Chargers team overall. Ditto and Rotom are also going to be pretty decent utility Pokemon on MV's team this match. Definitely see the potential in those coming overall because of how often he's brought the Rotom and the defog potential that he normally tries to abuse. But yeah, definitely leaning in favor of Leo. Potentially has some bias there, but I'm not afraid to say it. So just hoping that he moves on and potentially continues to fight for that WBE belt. And for the last match, we have the Florida Gators, coached by It's Gator, going against the Maryland Torterrapins and Under the Radar. Now, this is a rematch from Week 12, where the Florida Gators won 4-0. Kelly didn't really show anything in the match. I believe he brought Pokemon that he used in the week before, or fairly similar sets he already had just in his PC. But Gator actually brought a strong team and something that he's likely to see. So Kelly's able to build off of that and learn what to expect in the next coming games. So for example, like Calm Mind Keldeos could be a big issue for the Maryland Torterrapins. It's just really good versus team in general. You can easily just run Calm Mind, Hydro Pump or Scald with like Waterium Z, and then you run like Secret Sword, and then lastly you can run Substitute. I don't really think you need another move. Substitute's just pretty helpful overall, especially if you're able to deal with the Milo if it's just trying to haze and you can whittle it down and not give it a chance to recover. So there's a few things like that. The Water Z mainly helps for bulky Pokemon such as Zygarde, Mesprit, and Mega Sableye. You're easily able just to OHKO them right out with that move and just blow them back because Z moves are busted, and that's going to be very big, especially on Pokemon such as the Mesprit and the Zygarde. That would be pretty huge. Mega Sableye isn't that big of an issue for their team overall, but the Calm Mind Keldeo just proves to be an issue, and I really wouldn't be surprised to see it again in their match this time around. One thing that I found pretty interesting that I feel like could be a potential bring for Gator would be a Focus Sash Skill Swap Celebi. This is for sure Rock's turn 1/2 no matter what versus Kelly's team. Kelly really relies on like the Magic Bounce and Mega Sableye to prevent hazards or no removal at all, and I feel like that's definitely going to be the likes of this week. So with this Focus Sash Skill Swap Celebi, if they lead Mega Sableye, Fake Out into Shadow Ball won't kill you at all as long as you have like some HP, and of course, and it's very not likely that it's going to be an offensive Sableye. So, the Fake Out plus Shadow Ball doesn't hurt you like at all, and you're still able to get up rocks after you skill swap, because when you skill swap, it still bounces, but no matter what, you still swap with your opponent, and you're able to get rocks up the following turn, because even if he were want to taunt with like the Mega Sableye instead the second turn, after like potential Fake Out on the Mega Evolution, for example, then you're able to Magic Bounce the taunt onto the Mega Sableye, and then you don't have to worry about that doing anything, and you can easily expect a potential knockoff coming off next turn, or just a forced switch out. And then also if they were to lead like Scarf Darmanitan or something of the sort, because Darmanitan is very terrifying and Kelly does so well with it, you're able to of course take any hit, whether that's U-turn or just a Flare Blitz in general. I feel like only Bandit is going to be really KOing you if you are just an HP speed invested Celebi, unless it's just Flare Blitz might outright KO, because I know Flare Blitz does more than U-turn, apart from Celebi's 4-time weakness and everything like that. But you're able to live it because of the Focus Sash, and you're just able to get up rocks immediately, which could be huge, especially with Flare Blitz on Darmanitan. It's already taken great recoil from that Celebi, and then you're getting up rocks. And if it's not like Scarf, then you're able to click Psychic the following turn and get a lot of damage off versus the Darmanitan if you also not to switch out. Between the recoil and the Psychic after, I'm pretty sure Darmanitan would just drop to rocks after, which is pretty big, so you're definitely limiting and switching if you didn't bring removal at all. But apart from that, an offensive Celebi also has great potential. Whether you just want to bring like special offensively or potential like physical SD, because I do see a few people bring that. I feel like just overall specials can be better with Psychic and Giga Drain for sure, and then you can run like Hidden Power Ice just to really help versus the Zygarde, of course, because that thing is just a massive threat. You could even run Healing Wish on the Celebi in order to very support the important mons such as Keldeo, like I mentioned with the Calm Mind. It'd be great for Arceus, which of course is at the hands of the ability of Defeatist, where if it's under 50%, it does have its attack stat and everything like that, so you'd be able to get that thing healthier and do more damage with that. Zorora, which I feel like would be a great pivot mon with like Full Switch or something like that, or just be taking Life Orb damage in general. You'd be able to heal that boy back up and potentially have like Bulk Up or some sort of setup on Zorora to benefit from that as well. Heatran's going to be playing a strong role in this game for sure. I see it as a Toxic Trapper with just Toxic Magma Storm. Of course, you have to land your Magma Storm, but I feel like it could even run the wide lens if it wanted to make sure you're a little bit more likely to land the Magma Storm, because I really don't feel like you were forced to run like Shucka or Leftovers this week for Tran. You can do something like that. You can be another Rocker if you don't want to run on Celebi, which is pretty likely. You can Grass Seed to blow back the Milotic if you're offensive. There's a lot of things Heatran can do this week, but I really feel like it benefits from just being Toxic Spam Spadef to really help versus Pokemon like Superior and the Alolan Raichu, things like that. Mainly as a Superior, because it's just a big sweeping threat in general to almost any team. You can also definitely run Hidden Power Ice to force a sub setup Zygarde just to kill you outright. You don't want to let that thing to get behind a sub and be extremely annoying, especially if you lose your Milotic. Typically Milotic can deal with any form of Zygarde no matter what, but in specific scenarios, you might want something to where no matter what, you're not letting that thing just outright win versus your team. So you have to be aware of a few things like that. Pyukumuku as the main Darmanitan answer is not the best. Of course, you do have the Flare Blitz immunity with Heatran, but apart from that, Pyukumuku coming in is not that great, especially when even Darm can run Taunt and just abuse Pyukumuku. A lot of things can run like Taunt or Sub and just abuse that thing. It's not great overall with not having any attacking moves at all. Of course, you can run like Baton Pass for momentum. You can get a Toxic off if you really want to and everything like that, but overall it's not going to be the best. I definitely see Zorora having a great game though. I would like to see just a standard Life Orb mix set with like Plasma Fist, HP Ice, and Knockoff. For the last slot, you can definitely run like Close Combat to get more damage off versus the Stack Attacka if you really wanted to. You can run Volt Switch for momentum if you feel like that's the best option. Maybe run Bulk Up if you feel like Knockoff with Plasma Fist is going to win you late game. But overall, you're going to want HP Ice for that Zygarde for sure. Lastly, Mega Hera does pretty good for Gator's team, but it didn't do that great in the matchup that they had. It just died pretty early because of a few chips, and I believe it died to Psychic. But if you just make that a bulky Mega Hera with max attack Adamant, you're going to be trading him on for Amon, which I feel like is going to be very beneficial to either Gator, or mainly Gator in the long run, because a lot of people aren't ready just to lose Amon versus Mega Hera because of the amount of bulk it has, and the tremendous amount of physical offense that it carries in the attack stat, that it just get rid of a Mon and then you have an easy revenge option, but it doesn't matter because you lost an important Mon on your team, and now that's going to benefit something else on the Gator side, so you have to be a little bit aware of that. As for the Maryland Road Terrapins, Kelly, once again, he's going to abuse Darmanitan. He is one of the kill leaders for the overall WBE, and he has been doing tremendous with it all season. I definitely just feel like it's potential Scarf or Choice Band Darmanitan is going to be doing the most. You can even run Life Orb if you want to ensure that you're not locked in versus something you're even able to click Earthquake versus the Heatran after, in case you are worried about getting that Fire type boost on the Heatran, because Flash Fire spam is actually pretty dangerous versus your team, especially if Milo's weakened or gone in general. But you can also run Taunt in order to deal with the Pyukumuku, like I mentioned before. So you can really abuse Darmanitan like that. Of course, you got U-Turn with potential momentum, which is going to be pretty big for your team. Zygarde overall, sub up bulky Thousand Arrows with like Toxic is just really annoying versus Gator's team, especially if Pyukyu and Donphan are like the designated answers. Of course, Ice Shard is doing enough, but you're able just to Toxic and like sub versus the Donphan and get like your, of course, your leftovers recovery back and everything like that, then you're just being pretty annoying, and you're just getting a lot of chip off for some Pokemon in the back, such as that Darmanitan or even Alolan Raichu, because I do feel like Alolan Raichu has a good matchup. You just have to be aware of the electric immunities in that Zorora and the Donphan, which are going to be pretty big. You can run like Fight C in order to hit the Heatran as hard as you want. You're still getting good damage off on the Zorora and the Donphan, but you can also run like a mixed with a little attack investment and run Z-Dig, which actually allows you to get the KO on Zorora, because Zorora is not that bulky in general, and especially if it's like a minus defensive nature to run mix with Empower Ice, for example, or you're able to still get a lot of damage off versus that Heatran, which could be pretty big as well. So when it comes down to it as well, I would like to see like a Scar or an offensive Scyther. I feel like it could definitely catch Gator off guard, but at the same time, it's very easy to limit Scyther because of rocks, and especially with the amazing rockers that Gator has in Celebi, Heatran, and Donphan. Mainly just those. Of course, Archeops gets rocks as well. But it's just going to be so hard for it to do anything, if anything at all. So it's, even though I'd like to see it come, I definitely don't think it's likely. I definitely see Kelly going with reliable Pokemon such as like the Mesprit. I feel like Mesprit coverage and just Stealth Rocks on that has great potential for him just to support his team. But in the end, I definitely feel like his win cons are in Darmanitan and Zygarde, and then just strong support in the remainder of his team, because Kelly has a set plan every time, and he'll go with that plan, and he has Pokemon that will be sacks, and he has a Pokemon he needs to keep around for the long run. So when it came down to voting for this round, once again, I feel like I have a little biased, but I had to go for Kelly and the Maryland Terrapins. As for the analysts, we have majority voting in the Florida Gators this week, actually. We have 2 analysts in Uzi Gunner and Chris Cobain voting in favor of Gator this week, while we had 4 analysts, and Jacob is always actually locking in for the Maryland Terrapins, while the fans at home decided to vote in favor of the Florida Gators as well. CJ, is there anything you'd like to add to the game and why you picked Kelly?
The main thing is, I think that Kelly wants this really bad. He's been giving 110% all season long. And Gator has had a tremendous season, getting 11 wins, just losing the first game and the final game of the regular season. But I think it's clear that he's not as motivated as Kelly in terms of this league. So I think that definitely plays a role. I don't think that can be understated. I agree with your assessment. Like Darmanitan and Zygarde, I think, are both major threats. If I were Kelly, probably what I would try and do is use my Superior to weaken the Heatran, use the Darmanitan to weaken the Donphan and the Pyukumuku, and then try and win with a +1 Zygarde with Outrage, because there's no Dragon Resists besides Heatran on the Gator's side. It's true that both Frostlass and Donphan get Ice Shard as an option, but like those barely do 50% to like even an uninvested Zygarde. Like even an Adamant Donphan is doing like 50 to 60% at most. So like if you want to, you can afford to get a little bit of bulk on that Zygarde. You just basically need to figure out how to outspeed the Zeraora, so you don't necessarily have to go max speed. And then Outrage spam just looks so good. Maybe you throw on the Devastating Drake on there just to make sure you can one-shot Celebi and Heracross. Otherwise, I like all the points that you brought up. I think Biolatics can be very heavily relied upon this game. Maybe we'll see some sort of trapping set from the Heatran like you alluded to, running that Magma Storm even if it's not 100% accurate. But I'm really hoping that Kelly can pull off the upset.
Alright everyone, that's going to be doing it for the games for this round of playoffs. Definitely a lot to go through, even just for a few games, but that's because these games are so important, because once you lose, you are out and you no longer have a chance of that belt. And that belt is looking very pretty to some of these coaches, and they are definitely fighting for it. So we're going to be seeing some amazing battles this week, some amazing sets. Make sure to check out all the coaches and everything like that. But as for the rest of the plugs, I'm actually going to leave that to CJ.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and thank you guys, of course, for watching the video. If you enjoyed this analysis of the quarterfinal games, definitely appreciate it if you guys dropped a like on the video. And if you wanted to leave a sub, that would be a great way for you to stay up to date on all the latest and greatest analyst content that's coming out each week. We still have pick'ems, of course. We still have weekly recaps coming out for playoff season, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Down in the description below, we do have links for all of our fantastic coaches. Definitely the playoff coaches, you should make sure to go check them out. But make sure you check out the other non-playoff coaches as well, because we have a lot of great entertainers in our league. Some of them are even doing sort of scrim games with the teams that they had in the regular season for WBE, so make sure you check that out. Make sure down in the description below you also check out some of our sponsors like Poke Ninja's Pixelmon servers. That's been getting tremendous support, so thank you so much for that. If you'd like to buy a shirt, check on the link to the Ownage store and get a shirt with your favorite WBE team on it, or get one with the WBE League logo. That would be really cool. If you get one, make sure you take a picture and tweet it at WBE. We'd love to retweet it. And of course, yeah, once again, thank you all for watching and for all your continued support. We hope that you are excited for these games. Ben and I are definitely hyped, as we said at the beginning of the video, that we think this is going to be a tremendous round of games. All of these coaches are top tier, scary battlers. These are battlers that you would expect to see in the championship of any other league, but because we've got so many great talents here together, you get to see all the coaches of this caliber just in the quarterfinals. So I think that tells you a lot about how the qualities of these games are going to turn out, so make sure you check them all out. So thank you guys for watching. Until the next time, we will see you all later.
Deuces.